So building interactivity into your motion ad is actually pretty simple in Animate. So right now we've just got the ad and it comes in. We've got some nice easing on these different elements. What we want to do is make some of these pieces interactive. And there are a couple of approaches to doing that. We could turn this into an interactive button sort of thing instead of just text. We could make it so that the user can click on the phone and that would do it. However, usually with an ad of this nature, you're going to want sort of like an invisible overlay over the entire thing, and somebody can click on that. So what we're going to do is right above our image layer, we're going to create a new layer, and I'm going to rename this to overlay. You can call it whatever you like, of course. And from here, I'm going to choose my rectangle tool. And the color and style can really be anything you want, depending upon the approach. So what I usually do if I want a interactive element that's invisible, I'll actually change the fill to like this nasty bright green color. And I'll use that when I draw it out onto my stage here. So I'm going to draw that out, just cover everything with it. And with the selection tool, if I choose this, I can make sure it's 300 by 250, which is the size of my stage. And it's positioned at X and Y of 1. So this is completely covering the stage. All right, so with this selected, I'm going to choose to modify and convert to symbol. The reason I do that is because a shape by itself cannot have interactivity applied to it because it can't be identified through code. So what we need to do is to turn this into a movie clip symbol. Movie clip symbols are unique inside of Animate because they allow you to bind interactivity to them. So I'm going to give this a name of overlay and hit OK. Make sure it's a movie clip symbol as well. There we go. All right, so now we can see this is a movie clip. It's an instance of overlay, and it's selected on the stage. Notice right here, we can provide an instance name for this. This is crucial, and this is something you absolutely need to do in order to bind any sort of code triggers to it. So we want somebody to be able to like click on it or tap on it or whatever. So we need to actually give this an identifier, an instance name. So we have to decide what to call this thing. We could just call it button or click area or whatever. I think click area is pretty good. Now, there are some restrictions around how you can name these things. Generally, just name it, all lowercase or all uppercase. Just be consistent. And don't put any spaces or weird characters in there or anything like that. All right. So now we've got our element and it has an instance name. So what we need to do now is actually lock this and then create one last layer. So this layer is actually where our code is going to be held. And traditionally, inside of Animate, you name such a layer actions, and you put it way at the top of your layer stack. So here I've named it actions, and you can actually lock this layer because you don't want any visible content inside of your actions layer. You only want code. So to actually add code to this, you notice I have an empty keyframe here. So what I will do, before we do that, let's unlock overlay again because we can't see the ad anymore, obviously. So what we need to do is select that movie clip symbol instance, click area, before we do anything else. And in color effects, we can choose alpha and just bring that alpha all the way down. Now, if we lock this once again and hit play, there we go. Okay, so now with that done, click inside of the actions layer in that blank keyframe, and you're going to want to go to Window, Actions. That's going to open up the Actions panel. But actually, since this is a frame, you can actually use this little button right here to bring up the actions panel. So I'm going to click on that. And here's our actions panel. Now, you can go ahead and just write code in here if you know what you're doing. However, it's a lot simpler to just use this add using wizard feature. Now, since we're using HTML5 canvas for our ad here, this is compatible with the wizard. So I'm going to click add using wizard. And here we just kind of build our interaction step by step. You can see that we're on the current frame, which is frame 1, name of actions, because we named it that. And it tells us here that the wizard's going to help us add some action so that actually having to write any code. So probably the easiest thing to do with an ad like this is choose go to web page. That's the action we want to happen when the triggering event occurs. So if we click go to web page, you'll notice it fills in some stuff here. And here it's going to go to adobe.com. We could have this go anywhere by just changing the URL here. So you can highlight it, you can edit it, and so forth. And once you're finished editing that, what you'll do is hit next. So when you hit next, we're now at step 2, and we have to select a triggering event. So you'll notice here a number of different things pertaining to the mouse. We have mouse click, double click. I'm going to choose mouse click. That's the simplest way to do it here. All it takes is somebody to click or tap on our ad, and they'll be taken to the website that we chose. And then the last bit is we need to select the object that's going to listen for the triggering event. And there is our click area object. So remember, we gave click area, we gave the overlay an ID or an instance name of click area. So it shows up in the wizard here. We can just select that. And then once that's done, hit finish and add. All right. So what you see here is we're on the actions layer of frame 1 inside of scene 1. I can pull this over a little bit so we can see some more here. So you don't really need to know the code that's going on here, but I will explain it anyway. The first thing we do is we declare a variable called underscore this, which is set equal to this. Now, this is basically the current scope or the kind of like main timeline area. We don't actually even quite need this to happen, but that's okay. This is what the wizard does for us. This next one here, it's going to say, hey, this, which again is that current scope, and then dot click area. So click area is that instance name we gave to our overlay. And then we bind a click event. So we're saying on click, fire off a function that we're going to detail next. So once it detects a click on our click area, it's going to fire off a function. And the function itself is simply going to open adobe.com in a new browser window. And that's really all there is to it. We can now close this out and save it quickly, and then go ahead and test it out by clicking the Test Movie button. It's going to package everything up for us. All right, so there's that. Now, you'll notice a couple things here. One thing is it keeps playing over and over again in a loop. And I actually can't click on anything. So we need to fix both of those things before we test this again. Notice here as well, you get a number of different warnings here. These warnings you can pretty much, you don't have to really pay attention to them. They're just giving you information about what's happening when it publishes and kind of, some information around how you might want to consider these different platforms. So inside of our timeline here, there's 2 ways to get around the unclickable overlay. One of them is to go in here and instead of being alpha at 0, just take it to 1%. 1%, you're barely going to be able to see at all. Another thing we could do instead of this is we could enter into here and take our fill internally down to 0%. And that would do it for us too. With that done, we need to make sure it doesn't loop over and over again. And there's two ways of doing it. One is through the Actions panel once again. However, with HTML5 Canvas, there is an easier way. We're going to go into More Settings for our Publish Settings. And inside of our Publish Settings, you'll notice there's an option to loop the timeline, which is enabled by default. So we're going to uncheck that box. And then if we go down and hit OK, it's going to make sure to not any longer loop that timeline for us. All right. So let's go ahead and test again. Test movie. It's going to package all our assets once again. All right, so notice now it actually stops. And if I click, it takes us to adobe.com. Pretty good. We now have a fully interactive motion ad that can be used on the web.